You are listening to KSG Podcast. This is a short, crisp, concise, exam oriented, edited editorial for civil services aspirants. In this podcast, we are going to talk about the key proposals in draft battery swapping policy. Source for the content is Soumyarendra Barik's article for the Indian Express. Government think tank Niti Aayog has prepared a draft battery swapping policy under which it has proposed offering incentives to electric vehicles with swappable batteries, subsidies to companies manufacturing swappable batteries, a new battery as a service business model, and standards for interoperable batteries, among other measures. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had announced during this year's union budget that the government was set to roll out a battery swapping policy in a bid to reduce upfront costs of purchasing EVs and drive adoption among buyers. It also comes amid several instances of EVs erupting into flames, raising concerns about their safety. The policy is targeted at supporting the adoption of battery swapping, primarily for battery swapping systems used in electric scooters and three-wheeler electric rickshaws. The draft is up for consultation and the Niti Aayog has invited comments on it until the 5th of June 2022. Now, what is battery swapping? Battery swapping is a mechanism that involves exchanging discharged batteries for charged ones. This provides the flexibility to charge these batteries separately by delinking charging and battery usage and keeps the vehicle in operational mode with negligible downtime. Battery swapping is generally used for smaller vehicles such as two-wheelers and three-wheelers with smaller batteries that are easier to swap compared to four-wheelers and e-buses, although solutions are emerging for these larger segments as well. So, what are some of the key proposals? The draft policy has suggested that the GST Council consider reducing the differential across the tax rates on lithium ion batteries and electric vehicle supply equipment. Currently, the tax rate on the former is 18% and 5% on the latter. The policy also proposes to offer the same incentives available to electric vehicles that come pre-equipped with a fixed battery to electric vehicles with swappable batteries. The draft policy states that the size of the incentive could be determined based on the kilowatt hour rating of the battery and compatible EV. An appropriate multiplier may be applied to the subsidy allocated to battery providers to account for the float battery requirements for battery swapping stations in different battery swapping systems, the draft policy further said. The government will also specify minimum contract duration for a contract to be signed between EV users and battery providers to ensure they continue to provide battery swapping services and receiving the subsidy. The policy also requires state governments to ensure public battery charging stations are eligible for EV power connections with concessional tariffs. It also proposes to bring such stations under existing or future time of day tariff regimes so that the swappable batteries can be charged during off peak periods when electricity tariffs are low. Transport departments and state transport authorities will be responsible for easing registration processes for vehicles sold without batteries or for vehicles with battery swapping functionality, the draft says. Municipal corporations will be responsible for planning, zoning permissions, and land allocation for battery swapping stations. The policy also proposes to assign a unique identification number to swappable batteries at the manufacturing stage to help track and monitor them. Similarly, a UIN number will be assigned to each battery swapping station. It also proposes to install battery swapping stations at several locations like retail fuel outlets, public parking areas, malls, kirana shops, and general stores, etc. Now, what is the battery as a service model? Niti Aayog said battery swapping will fall under the battery as a service business model, and such models would have to ensure interoperability between EVs and batteries for a successful mainstreaming of battery swapping as an alternative. The draft policy says that given the nascency of battery swapping, interoperability between EV batteries and other components within a battery swapping ecosystem is adequate for eligibility under the policy, as long as all components within the ecosystem adhere to the technical and performance standards defined for BAS and battery swapping services. Apart from the batteries themselves, major battery providers will be encouraged to sign data sharing agreements to provide information on battery health and performance and to enable more flexibility to consumers through peer to peer roaming networks. The draft adds that for the classification of collected data under the broad categories of proprietary, restricted access, private and open data, a non-restrictive detailed guideline will be developed for adherence by all industry players. This policy requires ecosystems to be open to allow participation from other market players in order to be considered for support under the policy. The policy will only support batteries using advanced chemistry cells, that is ACC, with performance that is equivalent or superior to EV batteries supported under the government's FAME 2 scheme. As of now, two-wheel EV maker Bounce has launched an electric scooter with a swappable battery. Under the company's business model, customers can pay to swap their battery at one of their stations whenever it runs out of juice. Now, does the draft policy talk about EV safety? To ensure a high level of protection at the electrical interface, a rigorous testing protocol will be adopted, the draft said, to avoid any unwanted temperature rise at the electrical interface. The battery management system, which is software that controls battery functions, will have to be self-certified and open for testing to check its compatibility with various systems and compatibility to meet safety requirements, it added. This particularly assumes significance given the recent incidents of electric two-wheelers bursting into flames. The draft said that batteries shall be tested and certified as per AIS 156 and AIS 038 Rev 2 standards for safety of traction battery packs, as well as additional tests that may be prescribed for swappable batteries, which are subject to multiple coupling or decoupling processes at the connectors. Additionally, for better protection of assets, swappable batteries will have to be equipped with advanced features like IoT-based battery monitoring systems, remote monitoring, and immobilization capabilities. The Aayog has proposed that all metropolitan cities with a population of more than 40 lakhs will be prioritized for the development of battery swapping networks under the first phase, which is within 1 to 2 years of the draft policy getting finalized. Other major cities such as state capitals with a population greater than 5 lakh will be covered under the second phase. So that's it for this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. To join KSG India courses and to crack the IELTS exam, visit ksgindia.com. You can also get a PDF of this podcast on ksgindia.com. Thanks for listening and do subscribe to our channel.